this episode of Dialogues with Creators. This time around, it'll just be me, and be prepared for some opinions and some very heavy-duty information about a subject I've been researching for the last few years, generative artificial intelligence. Stay tuned. Some of the listeners to this podcast know Jerry Dry, Associate Professor of Communication at Dalton State College. He has been on this podcast 3 times, and some of you may know that his office used to be right next to mine. Actually, his office is still in the same place. I am the one who is no longer there. Retirement. We were trying to hire a new faculty member for the department back in the spring. And he called a reference who happened to be someone that was at his former institution and whom he knew actually well. This gentleman told him how he had published 20 books in the past year, how he had used generative artificial intelligence. Or I should say, he more than used it. He just prompted the AI generative software or platform to write a book of a certain length along certain lines on certain subjects, and voila, he had a book to self-publish on Amazon and make money from, and say he had written a book, or at least he had published a book. Well, I think you all know what I think about that. Yet, I know this person is one of many. There's no way to make an estimate of people doing the same thing or using generative AI to do their jobs or to write academic papers. To quote George Costanza's father on the old comedy Seinfeld, quote, "I have a lot of problems with generative AI, and you people are going to hear about them," end quote. This is my airing of grievances, and it's not even Festivus. Today's episode is about artificial intelligence, or more specifically, generative artificial intelligence, and the problems it causes in my worldview as a writer and educator, human being and Christ follower, reader and critic of literature. In a previous episode, I had Amber Nagel on to speak about how she uses generative AI and the ups and downs of using it for writers. I so appreciated her time, but I did not really present my side during that one. I let her talk. Today I will. I might bring in some other voices and research. I hope you find it entertaining, informative, irritating, scary, and helpful. My first experience with generative AI was, well, I was going to say it was a paper from a student who slept through class and suddenly wrote like a Nobel Prize winner. But it goes back further than that. I have used Grammarly for years, and I've talked to chatbots, and really different forms of AI are all around us. So what is AI? Here's one different definition from a pretty reliable source on the subject, NASA. Artificial intelligence refers to computer systems that can perform complex tasks normally done by human reasoning, decision-making, creating, etc. There is no single, simple definition of artificial intelligence because AI tools are capable of a wide range of tasks and outputs. But NASA follows the definition of AI found within EQ 13960, which references Section 238G of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2019. And then it goes into a bulleted list. I'm going to read a few of them. Any artificial system that performs tasks under varying and unpredictable circumstances without significant human oversight, or that can learn from experience and improve performance when exposed to data sets. Second bullet point, an artificial system developed in computer software, physical hardware, or other context that solves tasks requiring human-like perception, cognition, planning, learning, communication, or physical action. Third, an artificial system designed to think or act like a human, including cognitive architectures or neural networks. Going down the list, an artificial system designed to act rationally, including an intelligent software agent or embodied robot that achieves goals using perception, planning, reasoning, learning, communication, decision-making, and acting. So you see some common thoughts here on this list. And I would recommend you look at the show notes where I have a lot of links to these information. So I did not read the whole definition that NASA provides. I do want to say that I feel something of a hypocrite. This is a podcast about the problems of generative AI, but I still use it occasionally, far less than I did when I was working. I would like to avoid all use whatsoever of it. The customer service website uses it for questions. It is embedded in websites, and if I use Wikipedia, there's no telling how much of that is AI generated. A lot of YouTube is now based on generative AI, although I've learned to detect it and stay away from those videos. And of course, there's GPS. I plan to use it as little as possible, but let's be real. I know I will resort to GPS and some other AI tools in a pinch. My real enemy, though, if I call it that, is generative AI, or ChatGPT-4, and now ChatGPT-5 and its many siblings, because that has the most effect on learning and writing. I should say that I've been working on this podcast for a while, and something is happening with AI all the time. It's either Twitter's X's AI grok becoming a Nazi and defending the Holocaust, or it's the AI corporations rolling out a new generation of tools in early August. Recently, I read an article, which is linked in the show notes, that we should not call it artificial intelligence because it doesn't show intelligence. Nathan Beacom, writing for The Dispatch, stated, and here the quotation starts, "In lieu of artificial intelligence, I propose a more accurate, ethical, and socially responsible name, quote, pattern engine, end quote. Early computers, which would find mathematical differences, were called difference engines. This name adequately recognized the reality of the machine at hand. Quote, AIs, end quote, are indeed engines, and engines made for aggregating patterns and sorting data into statistical correlations. They are, truly, engines that sort things into patterns and produce outputs based on the statistical weight of what has been sorted, end of quote. I like what he is saying here because the technology that makes it possible for that professor to write 20 books is based on large language models. I am not dismissing the science behind large language models and their application to write readable, fairly coherent, and generally relevant text. More on all that later, in less than 5 seconds, depending on the length. But it's not intelligence. If you define intelligence as understanding concepts, the program doesn't understand what it writes about. It is responding to programming, amazing programming, and its output seems guided by intelligence again, but it only seems. Its computations are based on infinite, to us, amounts of data. And one argument against its great progress is how much data is going to be needed for it to be truly intelligent. I also want to steal Nathan Beacom's tripartite description: accurate, ethical, and socially responsible. I'm stealing it to use for a different purpose, just like AI does, but of course AI is not human, despite how it appears in its verbal output. Put a pin in that. And since it's not human, can't be made guilty of anything. Put another pin in that. I want to use it as a skeleton of my, if you will, argument. AI is not accurate, it is not ethical, and it's not socially responsible. Or, again, I correct myself. The use of it is in none of these things. Or should I say the dependence on it is none of these things. If you have not listened to my previous conversation on this subject with Amber Nagel, either turn this one off and go to that or listen to it right afterward. But one of the things we talk about there was the accuracy, both in terms of plain facts and writing tags. Sure, it will be grammatically correct, but the writing will be distinctly AI. And we'll get into more of that later. The belief that AI will be entirely accurate is wholly without foundation. I encourage you to test it. I did so with the famous pundit columnist I follow. It had wrong his alma mater and what he wrote about. Recently, the AI overview on Google said that Russell Moore, who's the editor of Christianity Today and the former head of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Board, is the husband of Beth Moore, the Bible teacher, who also left the SBC at about the same time. They are not related, which they always make a point to say. Moore is Beth's married name, of course. But now a lot of people will think they are and say they got it off of Google AI. I bring this up first because it's the practical side of things. If you have to check the output's factuality, how far do you go with that? Every assertion or piece of information. And so where's the time saver, which seems to be the main reason why people use generative AI? I recently found an article online in a search that confessed it was written by AI. That was the byline. Why I even read it, I don't know. It did have sources at the end, so I clicked on them to check. At least one of the three sources given had absolutely nothing to do with the subject of the article. But at least it was a real article. AI also famously makes up sources. Those have been called hallucinations. Where it cites a legitimate source, it is likely to misquote it or misinterpret it. Because it is a pattern engine, not a context understanding engine or an understanding engine, period. ChatGPT 5 is supposed to be improved in that regard. So far, the reviews are not saying it is. Well, maybe, probably not. Back in the spring when I was employed, I was in a meeting with some academic administrators, and one of them reported on a meeting he had had with employers in a local county. The employers made it clear that they wanted employees who could use AI, and this administrator thought this was something we should heed in our departments. Some of the departments represented there were English, communication, and history. Let's just say there wasn't an amenable response. But I've thought about it a lot. Did the employers know that AI was so prone to errors and that its writing style was so AI-ish? What did they want the employees to do with it? Just save time? Did they want them to use it in producing written reports that weren't really going to be read by anyone for any serious purpose, but had to be written showing documentation like minutes of meetings, obligatory stuff? For standard generic emails? For summaries of documents or content? A use I can see the value of as long as the person reads it for correctness afterwards. I agree that employees should have the skills to use it wisely, but I doubt employers really grasp the problems of it if they see its benefits mainly as saving time and money. I suspect the largest benefit they see is saving on employees' wages. As an offshoot of AI being inaccurate, generative AI writing doesn't always pass the smell test in terms of style or authenticity. I realized early that AI has a fixation on certain patterns of writing. One is sets of three. Something cannot be beautiful and efficient. It has to be beautiful, well-designed, and efficient. Isn't that somewhat redundant? A YouTuber, Evan Edinger, recorded a video called I Can Spot AI Writing Instantly. Here's how you can too, in which he points out that AI prose often starts with this construction. Subject isn't just ABC, M-, it's also X, Y, and Z. It also uses emojis on bullet points. Many people have noted the overuse of the M- as if it's written by Emily Dickinson in her poetry. There are a lot of generic words that don't mean very much. Edinger uses the opening line generated by AI for a tweet. It goes something like this. It goes like this, rather. Sometimes striking the perfect pose in photography isn't about dot, 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 end quote. Well, we don't strike a pose in photography, but in a photograph, the poser does not take the photograph, right? This is a logic error that a machine without context is unlikely to see. Once I checked Grammarly to see if it found a misplaced modifier. It did not, because that is a contextual human logic problem. A misplaced modifier would be a sentence like, lying in a pool of blood, I saw the deer. Now, just hearing that, you probably wouldn't make the connection, but on paper, it's a logic error. It's a misplaced or dangling modifier. Grammarly did not find that. But in another YouTube video, also in the show notes, the host reports on an article in the New York Times where a bestseller author wrote a short story based on the same prompt as given a generative AI platform. The AI story was written like a person who has not read much fiction. It used a number of cliches. The characters didn't talk or act like people. There were non sequiturs and red herrings, things brought up that weren't closed or referred to again. And there were summaries of actions rather than showing it. It was clearly not written by someone who knew what fiction writing was about. AI writing also gives lots of fluff, adverbs and adjectives, and always far more than you need. The tone is sometimes weird and robotic, and personal examples don't fit. This was how I figured out students were using it. An AI chatbot tool would be told to answer a certain question on the readings and to include a personal example. The student apparently did not read the personal example, which would say something like, quote, when I was head of HR at a company, I worked with a woman named Gloria. When I knew the student hadn't been in that position, then I saw it everywhere, or not. Actually, it was so obvious that students were using it because they did not know how to use it, how to do the prompts correctly. It was also clear they weren't reading the output to at least edit and know what they said. In my last 2 years of teaching, I included a unit in a business communication class about generative AI and even had a reading and exercise related to the prompts, so they would at least know that was something to pursue. These were junior level students, and I asked them to analyze the output based on 3 prompts I provided, but that they could tweak. It was a good assignment for them, and I was able to present on it at 2 conferences. But if I were still teaching, I don't know what I would do. I would have to restructure most of what I did in the classroom to prevent AI use or inappropriate AI use that had anything to do with the real world use of it is what you would want. So let's shift a bit and talk about some good uses that I see for AI. And we brought this up in the podcast with Amber Nagel. First, for super generic writing that doesn't need any thought or creativity, in which case I have to ask, why is it being created, period? Bad newsletters kinds of things, which are pretty much boilerplate in the first place. Is anybody going to read it and care? Minutes of meetings no one is going to read, but that someone would still have to record the meeting or provide notes for some sort of record-keeping purposes. A second one that I've used it for, and I think it is very useful, is brainstorming for topics. For example, when I was in Toastmasters, I had to come up with topics for the theme of the meeting, for impromptu speeches, and it was very good for that. Third, drafts that you are either going to have to rewrite and check or use as the prompt for the next draft and the next and the next until you get what you want. But watch out for the poor writing and the tells that I mentioned before that will signal to your readers you've used it. A fourth would be summaries of long and dry material when you're in a time crunch. But I think the only ethical thing to do is to admit to using it, which brings up something that Amber said in the podcast. A lot of people are using it and denying it. 5, as much as I hate to admit this, writing multiple choice tests questions based on a written text. However, again, you will have to check them carefully and probably edit. So let me reiterate that whatever you put, you get from AI, you need to go through and be very critical of it because it's probably going to lack context. and tone and clarity. I am not going to say that these are the only 5 or so ways it could be used, but they are the only 5 I see as valid now. This is not getting into the image issues for AI, where you can make pictures. I was reading a Substack article recently where the writer showed a lot of images, and they were quite beautiful, but they were derivative. For example, there was one that was in this style of a Monet. It was impressionistic, but an AI is not going to come up with a new style or a new genre of painting. They were beautiful pictures, though. But let's go back to my 3 points. Accuracy. It comes up short. Ethics is my second concern in this argument. And there is so much here that it's hard to know where to start. Obviously, as a student, if you submit the work of a generative AI as your own for a grade or for pay without being clear and upfront about it, and that matters. Some people will care and some won't. It's like what I said to my students about wholesale plagiarism. You're a big fat liar, and I don't care what happens to you grade-wise. Now, some people would say that's a little harsh, and I was supposed to be more empathetic, but I don't really see why I should not take lying for what it is. Oh, some say the students are so overwhelmed and feel so inadequate in their writing, and we should understand that. I grant you that they might be overwhelmed. Anybody who's been in college has been. And they might feel that their writing is inferior, and it probably is in some respect. But that is what learning is about. It's not about an easy way out to get a grade. It's about going through the struggle of improving your writing. We would not say that about a math or science class if the student cheated on an exam, especially if it's for a doctor or a nurse or an engineer. I saw a meme on Facebook recently. Your future doctor is using AI to cheat on his or her work, so you better live and stay healthy. Ha! And then I saw an ad for an AI tool, and the spokesperson was a young woman in medical school. Yikes. Yes, it's okay that engineer cheated on his math courses so he could build bridges and buildings that aren't safe. No, it's not. Cheating is cheating. And cheating is not a victimless crime, if you will, any more than adultery is. Some of this dismissal of students using generative AI for writing comes from a dismissal of the importance of writing in the first place and a dislike for it. I can understand disliking writing tasks, but not dismissing its importance as a form of communication, a way of learning, and an art form. Another issue is that generative AI denigrates, lowers the value of what communication is and what writing is. Generative AI creates, not really, it just outputs, coherent and generally relevant and accurate text. Its output is entirely verbal. We'll set aside images for the present. As we all know intuitively, communication is significantly nonverbal, and that in itself is an iffy statement. For years, we were told communication is 93% nonverbal, but that was a misunderstanding as well as being based on a faulty study in the early 1960s. And you can look this up if you have any concerns. The author of that study was Alfred Mehrabian, spelled Mehrabian, and it has been discredited. It's much less than 93%, but it's still a lot and still very important to the meanings that we communicate. Think about listening to this podcast. If I had no vocal changes in tone or speed or pitch, you wouldn't be listening to it very long. Plus, what is nonverbal communication? It's context, as well as the things our bodies do to supplement the meaning. There are all kinds of relational and social elements, like the white coat the doctor wears and her facial expressions in past encounters with her. Could an AI teach a class? Could it consult with you of your health? No, not really, if you understand how much teaching and that consultation is relational. which AI cannot do. In this regard, I'd like to read this quote again from an article in the Dispatch. Quote, as students increasingly outsource writing to artificial intelligence, the consequences may extend well beyond academic integrity. Writing for Engelsberg's Ideas, Aaron McLean argued that AI poses an urgent and profound danger to human reasoning. And then this is another quote from this person. An old professor of mine in my freshman year once said something wise and important to a seminar I was in when one of the classmates observed that I know what I think, I just can't get the words down on the page. My teacher responded, well, you don't actually know what you think then. The act of writing is the same thing as the thinking of it. If you can't write it, you haven't actually thought it. Now, we have technology that, in essence, is promising to supplant the core and foundational human activity, that of thinking. And if it is a bit sad that human beings are simply less musical than we used to be, this threat is much more serious. Freedom is, in the first and most essential place, intellectual freedom. The ability to reason clearly, to navigate received opinion and accumulated prejudice so as to pursue and sometimes even catch knowledge of things that matter. This activity, when directed at the things that matter most, is called philosophy. It's a kind of hunt, sometimes pursued in the cooperation of others, racing in bands across the limitless plain after our quarry. But in the moment of the kill, we all must kill alone for ourselves. The hunt for wisdom requires, of course, basic reasoning skills and ideally wide exposure to high-quality efforts of others to reason about things that matters. It requires learning, end quote. And I really like this because it focuses on how the use of generative AI is going to affect deeply our ability to understand and reason. Our dependence on AI now follows 30 years of addiction to screens. I doubt we would have been so nonchalant about it if it had showed up at the advent of the internet. We have become used to dealing with people mostly through screens, and of course, COVID made it worse. In Nathan Beacon's article, he starts with stories of how individuals confuse chatbots with people, leading to bizarre behavior. Suicides and despair over romances with chatbots, that kind of thing. Mental health therapy through a chatbot is a real thing. My experience with chatbots recently involved fussing with the Medicare supplement insurance companies. I thought I would talk to the little helper, knowing it was not real. Fortunately for me, the chatbot wasn't ready for my questions and got me a person to help. More and more, I'm seeing concerns that dependence on AI is destroying our brains. There's a famous study out from MIT on this subject, but it's just a start. All studies have limited participants. This one showed much less brain activity from participants using chatbots compared to those who did their own writing. Big surprise, right? Another very real concern is that if generative AI becomes the primary writing mode, its problems in style and authenticity, as there is more of it, will become the kind of writing we come to expect. This problem will be exacerbated because AI will be scraping itself and writing quality will decline ever more. What do I mean by scraping? Generative AI is using the massive amount of data on the internet to create those patterns it uses to determine what is the most likely next set of words to answer the prompt. Again, I don't pretend to understand all of it, but there are countless sites and videos about large language models. The more AI is used, the more it will clone itself, if you will, scrape its own output. Boy, that's a wild idea. And by the way, it's scraping anything you put up there on the internet. Amber said that she prompted it to write something in the style of Amber Laniel Nagel, and it was uncannily like her writing. Ethically, AI use fails the tests. But there's another side of it. What we are calling AI is flooding social media with fake content. It's scamming people financially and in so many other ways. It's wasting our time and it's making us dumb. So why does it exist? Because it can. While some would say for the good of humanity, and there are reportedly medical usages that can expedite diagnosis and care, it's hard to believe that a tool that writes papers for students and creates deep fakes, images of real people saying things they didn't, or of fake people saying fake things, it's hard to believe this is in our best interests. It saves time and therefore fewer employees are needed. Will people find jobs or will more be created? It's hard to know. Some sources say yes, some say no. Right now, young people are having a very hard time finding jobs coming out of college. Will people, this sounds like the 8-ball we used to play with. Some experts say that it will even affect certain types of physicians, such as radiologists, but not others, such as pediatricians, who interact more with patients face to face. Jobs that require a human body can't be done by AI alone. We'll still need servers and nurses and builders and landscapers and so on until robotics get that good. And we don't know when that will be. Another question about ethics is why this was foisted on the marketplace in the first place. Was there an outcry for it from consumers that led to its being created? Was anyone saying, we need a program that does all our writing for us, and thus our thinking? Who actually is the beneficiary of generative AI, really? My recent podcast guest, Dr. Elliot Parker of University of Mississippi, spoke of its beneficiaries being corporations that could hire fewer people for jobs that AI could do. Now, in the scientific realm, such as testing for drug efficacy and safety, I can see the benefits of it. And of course, it's known to write code very well. Although anytime it has to do with the drug efficacy or medical purposes, I do have to say, is it 100% accurate? There would still have to be people checking it. There are so many questions. I've been watching a lot of videos on YouTube and reading a lot of articles, and I have links in the show notes. One is from the wonderful Dr. Lennox, the mathematician and lovely Christian man from Oxford University. What a saint. You want to look up that lecture. Another is from a British mathematician and documentarian, Hannah Fry. She spurred my mind with questions that led me to ask, will AI kill us by making itself or becoming too smart, or by making ourselves too stupid by its overuse and dependence? Hannah Fry sort of disputes that it can become intelligent in a truly human way. I am more of the opinion that we will cede our humanity to it, our creativity and ethics and human effort and reasoning, before it gets too smart for its own good or for our own good. But to move to another subtopic regarding ethics, for myself as a writer, the major ethical question is, where does the material come from? Generative AI is a massive plagiarism machine. On this one, I recommend a John Oliver video, which I admit is blasphemous, but makes some startling points in this area for both writers and visual artists. AI is an idea and creativity thief. You can use other language to get around that, but that's what it does. In talking with Amber, I noticed we use two metaphors. AI scrapes the internet like some kind of scavenger, and it spits out its content. Yuck. It also puts graphic designers out of work. But you might say they've been using computer tools for years. Yes, but this situation is different. Generative AI doesn't create anything. Of course, one could argue humans don't really create anything either, but that's a deeper question. No one had ever written a book like, well, you name it, To Kill a Mockingbird, Great Expectations, or The Bluest Eye before. There have been coming-of-age stories, which all of these are, sort of, but no one had written anything like those books before. That we are just large learning that we are just large language models too, that we steal ideas and phrases and images and metaphors from each other and from writers of the past. Some might argue there is a little truth there. But humans have a lived experience from which they write, a commonality, a humanity, and a complexity. In Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, she's writing from the Black experience. And AI can't do that. AI could probably write short stories or novels that are entertaining and readable and in the style of Agatha Christie, and even bordering on good. But it needs the human prompting to train it. And the more we use it, the more we are training it and feeding the beast. So we had looked briefly at the ethics and the accuracy issues involved in generative AI. And I admit, this is simply an overview. I hope that you will look into this subject more. Check out the links in the show notes, and some of which are YouTube videos and some of which are articles. There's a great deal out there. My last concern is social responsibility. There are two areas here. Its output and the environment, which does not get talked about enough and surprises me. Some are aware that Twitter, or X's AI engine, Grok, what a name, called itself Mecha Hitler in mid-July 2025 and started putting out all kinds of anti-Semitic final solution garbage. Why? Supposedly, it was told to not be, quote, woke, end quote, so its answer was to be a Nazi. Binary thinking, anyone? Seriously, why would it start that? Go there. It's bizarre. It was shut down for a while, but what's to say that AI's generated output is not tainted by ideology? Of course it is. Remember, though, I said to put a pin in the concept that AI is not human and therefore cannot be guilty of anything or prosecuted or feel shame. It can pretend to by putting out words that represent those concepts because it is a pattern engine. But we know it's not shamed or embarrassed or anything like that. The big question for my generation, can AI become HAL the computer in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where to save its own existence, he secures the death of the astronauts who want to turn him off because they have learned he is too smart and controlling. That creepy voice, sort of like the shower scene in Psycho or the alien coming out of the android's gut in the first Alien, are embedded in our psyches. But our narratives matter, and we should not poo-poo these stories and visuals. I'm reading a book about the history of science fiction, which involves biographical material of Isaac Asimov. Asimov is known for the 3 laws of robotics. Number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. These seem idealistic now, but I wonder if some people, a lot of people, believe in them and think we are safe. Like the Mecha Hitler of Twitter's Grok AI tool, this is a human problem, and the machines will end up doing what the humans created to do, unless we envision a kind of original sin that would get into the program. Now, I am writing science fiction. I hope by now you see that the legislature of the U.S. should start to take this problem seriously. Instead of expecting corporations or the executive branch to do so, the people who are supposed to make our laws should be the actors in working toward a reasonable future of generative AI, if we can get them off of the TV talk shows long enough to do their jobs. But I digress. Finally, I challenge you to read up on the environmental impact of generative AI. Because we use our computers to access it, pulling from electricity and Wi-Fi in our homes or offices, we don't realize the huge bank of computers and servers needed for all that data processing. To keep them running, massive amounts of electricity is needed, and to keep them cool, massive amounts of water is needed. Please look at the MIT article on this subject in the show notes. It is this area I am most concerned about because, as the paper points out, there is unfettered growth in the use and development of AI without any discussion of the sustainability aspects, where the electricity is coming from or will come from, and how it's generated, and whether those demands and that of the water will affect the environment and the people who really need the water and power. I am concerned about it because water policy is important to me because no one is really talking about it. There's a lot out there about the psychological and intellectual harms, the ethical implications, the business uses, but not as much about how society can keep natural resources from being depleted due to the use of AI. And let's face it, most of its current uses are kind of silly, like making videos of Bigfoot as a video blogger. I feel like I can only scratch the surface. For me, I want to stay away from AI as much as I can, but I know I'm in the minority. I get depressed about it and wonder why I should write if so much writing is helped or sustained by AI, and how my granddaughter will learn to think with this in her life, surrounded by all the time as she grows up, and why we can't just be people again and get off of our screens. My granddaughter already loves the iPhone and knows she can change things with her finger. A few years ago, I finally read the science fiction classic Dune, a truly brilliant book. One of the characteristics of that future world is that there were no computers because of the war between AI machines and humans in the past, called the Butlerian Jihad, a holy war against computers. It does make me wonder, though, where is God in our use of AI? Where is our theology? There are many prophecies about AI, one being transhumanism, where our minds can be uploaded into the cloud and we can live forever. I don't think that sounds so promising or tempting to most people, but it goes back to what I said earlier about the output generative AI being language, but not context, nonverbals, embodied experience. We are embodied creatures, and the dualism of something like transhumanism goes against everything we are and everything I believe as a Christian. Dualism has been a pernicious philosophy for thousands of years, and it's antithetical to the Christian faith to which I belong. Jesus came in the flesh. That is a core teaching. And he died and rose again in the flesh. And there is a final bodily resurrection. Bodies and physical creation are good and redeemable and will be redeemed. Then there are concerns or promises of the singularity, which is a term used to describe the hypothetical point at which technology, in particular artificial intelligence powered by machine learning algorithms, reaches a superhuman level of intelligence and capability. It would or could be doom, depending on who has it, just as we have feared nuclear annihilation since Hiroshima. Well, that was an uplifting place to stop. I am not a Luddite, but I sincerely believe we have to step back from this technology as individuals and as a society and Americans and believers. AI is not those crazy videos on YouTube where a boa constrictor is fighting a polar bear. It is not Bigfoot as a video blogger. It is not babies reenacting scenes from movies. It is far more than that. In a recent article in The Atlantic, Charlie Warzel states his fear or hope that AI will end up being not that big a change for us. He writes, quote, "Good enough has been keeping me up at night, because good enough would likely mean that not enough people recognize what's really being built and what's being sacrificed until it's too late. What if the real doomer scenario is that we pollute the internet and the planet, reorient our economy and leverage ourselves, outsource big chunks of our minds, realign our geopolitics and culture, and fight endlessly over a technology that never comes close to delivering on its grandest promises? What if we spend so much time waiting and arguing that we fail to marshal our energy toward addressing the problems that exist here and now? That would be a tragedy, the product of a mass delusion. What scares me the most about this scenario is that it's the only one that doesn't sound all that insane." End quote. Be aware is all I can say. People far smarter than me have more to say, and you should read broadly on the subject, as it will have a great deal of effect on your life going forward. As the saying goes, rage against the machine and be as human as you can possibly be. Keep fighting back by doing your own writing, even if you think it stinks. Write like no one is going to read it. Forget the world, write for yourself. Create for yourself. Messy leads to magic. Write with no filters and don't depend on AI. Thanks for listening. This is the 10th episode in season 5. To be honest, I'm coming to a time for hiatus this fall. I have produced, with Clemencia's help, of course, over 80 episodes in the last 3.5 years. I come to a sort of crossroads. I need some ideas because I've exhausted all of mine right now. Let me know through my website, barbaragrahamtucker.net, if you have any ideas or contacts. Until then, check the show notes, click on the GoFundMe link, and please go back and listen to some of our past conversations. You'll be glad you did. Thanks for listening.